Hello friends and welcome to Sustainable Prepping, your home for fear-free emergency preparedness and sustainable life. My name is Brecky and today we're going to have an informal laundry chat. I'm going to talk to you about a topic on my mind and I'm going to fold some laundry. This morning's topic is going to be whether or not we should be afraid of the Golden Hordes that we hear talked about in a lot of prepping videos. If you're new here, I want to say a great big welcome. I'm glad you found my slice of the internet. I don't normally sound quite this groggy, and I normally post 2 videos a week, but my family has been knocked out by COVID. Did a little bit of travel. My grandmother was in hospice, and I went to see her, and we came back and we contracted COVID. So we're okay. We're quarantining at home. We haven't needed to go in for any medical care. I do have a throat lozenge and I will hopefully finish this pretty quick, but I had a quiet few minutes and I really wanted to make a video. So if I'm sounding like less than my normal peppy self, still getting over COVID, almost a week out, and it's just like the worst cold of my life, man. If you want me to do a video on what my symptoms have been like and what we're doing at home, drop me a comment and I'll make that video. But for today, I want to focus on the quote-unquote Golden Hordes. Golden Hordes is a term that the prepping community uses to discuss people, usually upper class, middle class people, not the super wealthy, but wealthier people, people we might call snowflakes, people without skills, people who haven't prepped, usually in suburbs or urban environments, who are going to come and take all your stuff, right? The golden refers to the fact that they're privileged. They probably are white collar job folks, right? And they're gonna come and they're 3 meals away from losing their minds and turning into zombies and beating you up, or worse, to take all of your gear. This is kind of this myth we talk about a lot in the prepping community. And those of you who've been around know that I was trained as a historian first before I went on to do a degree in religious studies and work in student ed and things like that. But I was trained as a historian, I was a living history reenactor, and it's very important for me that we learn from history. So what does history actually teach us about the quote-unquote Golden Hordes? What can we learn, particularly from sort of contemporary history? Well, I think the truth is that the Golden Hordes are actually going to be much less of a problem than we think. And there are a couple of reasons. The first reason is that human nature is to actually create community. We are tribal animals, okay? We are tribal animals. We're not lone wolf animals. The human animal, and we are animals, right? We exist in communities. Humans are not designed to be, one creature out in the wilderness. Our biology means that we have an inclination towards gathering as a community, being in community. This is why so many indigenous peoples still have like a tribal system, right? My family originated in Scotland, half my family did, and there's the clan system that was very, and to some degree, if you're in the Highlands, is still very important. These identities, these communities show us that we are creatures who seek to build community, even in bad circumstances. A great book about how this has happened historically is called A Paradise Built in Hell. I forget the author at the moment, but I'll make sure it's linked below. And this is sort of a review of major catastrophes, okay? Particularly environmental catastrophes that have brought people together, and where, if you look at the anthropology, so this is a professional anthropologist who's gone in and does research, basically what she's found is that people look back on these catastrophes with a little bit of nostalgia, because they were seasons in which the whole community, all these people who lived together but didn't know each other, formed community. The very first catastrophe she covers is the 1901 massive earthquake in San Francisco, and people died. Lots of people died. I mean, it was a bad situation, and yet people consider it one of the most important and not necessarily terrible events of their lives, because they created this community, they pooled resources. So this does happen, okay? There is a human inclination to build community. So I want us to hold this idea, right? That humans are going to want to build community. Yes, they're going to be panicked. Yes, they're going to be anxious, but our desire is to build community. At the same time, as we have a desire to build community, we also have a desire to have hierarchy. It's a part of our human nature, right? It's a part of our human animal nature to have hierarchy. And so if we're looking at a catastrophe in which the governmental systems that we currently depend upon to create law and order, to create an ordered environment, somehow are taken out, or there's a vacuum, something or someone is going to replace it. okay? Humans do not like to live in a power vacuum, and so some group, whether they're a good group or a bad group, is going to take it. And this is the conversation I want us to have today. There's a lot of emphasis on being afraid of the Golden Hordes, of being afraid of these middle class, snowflake, non-prepper, normies, or whatever you want to call these people. You might be one of these people who's just happened to find my videos. There's a fear, three meals away from mayhem. But in reality, history shows us, one, that before we get to that point, you're going to see communities banding together, whether those communities are voluntary communities, neighborhoods that come together and pool resources in order to survive a disaster situation, or they're going to be enforced communities, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. You're also not going to see a lack of power. We're not going to have large power vacuums that last for very long. Humans don't like that, so we're going to create hierarchical structures, and we're going to submit to them. And this is the key. In a shtf scenario, where there's been some kind of catastrophe, okay? And this is going to be multi-level. It's not going to just be a natural disaster, because we need something that's going to knock out national government and some level of local government as well, okay? I'm working in the United States, so I'm going to talk about federal and state level government. We're going to be talking about something that disenfranchises the police, the fire, the emergency services, right? Big scale emergency, big scale catastrophe, probably multiple catastrophes. My guess is that there's some kind of war happening, which has stretched our capacities thin, followed by natural disasters, followed by maybe an intentional attack. Something where we have lots of rolling issues. It's not going to be a single issue, okay? This is going to be a multi-level issue, because you have to knock out all forms of government. Even if you knock out all forms of government, humans are going to create government. And we're going to create systems, hierarchical systems. Those systems could be local government stepping up and leading, organizing people, right? This is your disaster folks. This could be your National Guard. It could be whatever. It could also be gangs. If you have gangs already operating in an area, they already have networks set up. They already have protocols in place. Those people are going to come in and become leaders. One of the weird situations is you find, right, that groups that we would consider terrorist organizations, so for example, in Palestine, Hamas, which has done terrorist activity, also does a lot of like governing, like they make sure people have water when there's droughts, and they make sure people have food and medical care, which is why they keep being popular, because they do all this really good work, and they also engage in some terrorist activity. So what do you do with that, right? This is what's going to happen. You're going to have gangs, or you're going to have community organizations that are going to act as paramilitary groups. You're going to have paramilitary groups that might be associated with the KKK or white supremacist groups come in. You are never going to find a space where people are just going to be buck wild. You're not going to find it. Maybe in pockets, but those pockets are going to become contained by areas who want hierarchy. And this is why I don't think you need to worry about the Golden Hordes. I think that that's a straw man argument. I think it's an argument to make you suspicious of your neighbors, rather than to be working with your neighborhood and all the people in your neighborhood or your apartment complex to be prepared for a disaster. This whole idea of being afraid of the Golden Hordes makes you afraid of your neighbor. But who should you really be afraid of? You should be afraid of the people who are going to come into power in a power vacuum. Because if it's the current government, you're going to become an internally displaced person. If you can't self-govern your neighborhood, your apartment complex, whatever, particularly if you live in an urban or suburban environment, you're much more likely under an official government guise to be moved if there's a catastrophe and become an internally displaced person, okay? Your enemy isn't your neighbor. It's the people who are going to be trying to move you around for their best interest. In the lack of actual governing, okay, the actual elected government is no longer functioning for whatever reason, you got to be worried about the groups that come in and take over if you haven't self-organized. If you and your neighborhood don't have a plan about what's going to happen, if you don't have some kind of elected group, if you don't already have a network and community of community mutual aid and assistance in place, someone's going to create the network. Someone's going to create the hierarchy, and they're not going to have your best interests at heart because they don't care about you. So this paramilitary government is going to come in, and they're going to organize you. And they're going to be a lot more dangerous, because if they're coming in a vacuum, if they're coming in and they haven't been elected, you haven't appointed them, your government, your little neighborhood hasn't had a say. They're just coming in because there's nobody else to do it, and everybody's panicking because this will happen. they're going to want to know what you have. They're not going to care about your individual rights and liberties and freedoms. They're going to take control to ease the panic. So every time you hear a prepper on one of these channels say, beware the Golden Hordes, they're going to come and take your stuff from your house, I would say make friends with all those people and introduce them to prepping, introduce them to mutual aid. Maybe they're not going to store 6 months of food like you, but you might convince them to have a 72-hour kit. You might convince them to have 1 week of supplies or 2 weeks of supplies. You might be able to all go in your community and have a bunch of people get trained in like EMT skills. You might be able to start a community garden that a whole bunch of people have buy-in. And if a whole bunch of people have buy-in, they're more likely to want to organize. And if they're more likely to want to organize, they're going to want to defend their neighborhood because their neighborhood has a sense of identity. That's going to do you a whole lot more good than thinking your neighbor is going to come and take all your stuff. Because your neighbor, unless you live next to someone actually crazy, which is possible, you could live next to somebody with mental health issues or ties to white supremacist terrorist organizations. I don't know your life, right? But unless they have those ties, unless, you have somebody who's in actual danger, you're more likely to be threatened by whatever military or government, paramilitary, paragovernment group comes in to take over in a power vacuum than you are from a hungry soccer mom, right? It takes more than not eating 3 meals to turn people into monsters. And I know everyone, does the woman who like punched somebody for a tickle me Elmo or whatever, but it's going to take a lot more to turn those people into zombie hordes. And you probably, I would say, I would be an 85% certainty. So long before we're going to see, that soccer mom turn into a ninja warrior to steal all your stuff, you're going to more likely see some organization come in and fill any kind of leadership governance vacuum. And that's who you need to be preparing for, because you don't know those people, you don't know their motives, you don't know what they're going to do. And if they come in with force, it means they're highly organized, theoretically. They're going to be organized, they're going to have weaponry, and they're not going to be afraid to use force to enforce power. And people who are scared, they're not going to care, right? They're not going to care. So what you can do now, right, on the front end, we see that there could be several different emergencies taking place. We see that there are a lot of different factors that could potentially set off a domino effect of bad news, okay? There's a war in Europe. There's famine and civil unrest in Latin America. There's beginning to be famine in Africa. So in essence, I don't think you should be worrying about the Golden Hordes. I don't think that you should be worrying about your normie neighbor who hasn't started prepping. I actually think it's an opportunity for you to get ahead of the crises that are coming and start talking to people about preparedness, and not just about emergency preparedness like shtf, the world is going to come to an end, but what if we can't get resources? What does our neighborhood want to do if there's ever a conflict in our community? If there's ever an active shooter in the neighborhood, like what do we want to do about that? Let's have some conversations. Do you know people who have skills in this area? Okay, I'm not sure where I was. I've been interrupted like 17 times, but you want to make community, know what people's skills are, have a plan in place, and don't be afraid of your neighbors. They're your greatest asset, truly. I want to know, friends, what do you think? Should we be afraid of the Golden Hordes, or do we think that that's a bit of a straw man argument and that we should actually be afraid of the kinds of government and leadership groups that will come into place in the event of a vacuum, a power vacuum after a catastrophe? I personally am way more concerned about who is going to create order, because communities don't just live in chaos, right? As much as anarchists would love for us to all be in chaos, we seek order. We're going to seek out and we're going to embrace order, and sometimes we do that to our own detriment. So comment down below and let me know what you think about that. Let me know your thoughts on the Golden Hordes, your thoughts on power vacuums and shtf. I would love to know what you have to say. It's good to see you guys again. I know it's been a while since I've been able to post regularly. This summer I thought was going to be full of lots of free time, and it just hasn't been. As you can tell, I'm still recovering from COVID. I think it's going to be kind of a slow slog back up to where I was, but knock on wood, we haven't had to go into the hospital, so hopefully it will stay that way. I hope you guys are all doing well. Of course, please check me out on all my socials. My links are down below. I'm not as active on Instagram, you guys. I just have not as much capacity, but I'm trying to get back into it. The Facebook group is there for good discussions. If you want to have a more in-depth discussion, or if you're interested in small group live streams, let me know. I'm happy to kind of meet you guys where you're interested. That's where I'm hanging out these days. And if you like this video, I know it's not a car chat like usual, it's a laundry chat, but I got to get stuff done, and this was an opportunity to get a video made. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and send it to a friend. And if you're interested in this conversation on Golden Hordes and power dynamics and all of that, let's have that conversation in the comments. I would really love to hear what you have to say. All right, friends, until the next video, happy prepping.